Today on Landline, the Cowgirl on wheels.
People don't know what to do with people in wheelchairs, especially when there's horses involved, and everyone's sort of a bit scared to let me do anything or try anything. And so that was where the idea of running my own stud came from.
Tea time on the Sunshine Coast.
We went into the tea-making thing very naively, thinking, oh, this will be easy. It certainly isn't.
And the outback postie and power of community.
Julia Creek does not have a traditional agricultural show. So I thought, well, we could have our own show, and I try to relate everything we do back to the mailboxes. So Mail Run Show is an agriculture show with a difference, I suppose. Would you like a show bag, Hank?
Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. For Lismore and other Northern Rivers communities, recovering from the devastating 2022 floods has been difficult. But after lots of planning, work and $60 million, a local ice cream factory owned by a dairy farmers cooperative is finally back in business. From Lismore, here's Bronwyn Herbert. It's milking time at this dairy near Lismore. Paul Weir works his 400-strong herd through the morning routine. Since the region's record flooding last year, the 51-year-old dairy farmer is still counting the toll.
The losses for us on the farm here were in excess of probably $3.5 million in damage and then loss of income. A lot of people are tired, you know, even 20 months down the track. We've done about 10 kilometres of fencing. It's like the block, only that it's lasts for you know, the last 20 months. You know, we've had to basically just about touch everything and rebuild it.
His biggest loss was his stock. 110 cows and calves were washed away.
You love your cows, you know, and you know, we've reared all those cows from birth and their generations on breeding, and we did see a lot of them actually to get washed away. Knowing those cows were in my care, you know, and you know, I had them up in what I thought was a safe spot, but that didn't turn out to be that way.
While trying to rebuild his own business, he also had sleepless nights as a director of Norco, an Australian-owned dairy cooperative with members on nearly 200 farms in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. He was mulling over whether Norco's ice cream factory in Lismore would ever be rebuilt. It sustained more than $50 million damage from the record high floodwaters and tens of millions more in lost product. The factory was the largest private employer in the area and also the recipient of millions of litres of locally produced milk.
From a farmer cooperative point of view, there's no way that we would have had the money, considering that, you know, our whole farmer base had just been smashed with, you know, with the extended wet weather and the flood. So yeah, there was a lot of campaigning, there's a lot of worried nights, will it, won't it?
A quarter of Norco's staff were rescued in floodwaters or had their homes damaged, including Josh and Lindy Joy Sawtell from South Lismore.
We had cows going past the front, which was heartbreaking.
You lose your house and then you see your place of employment gone, and sort of heart sinks that little bit more, just knowing that, you know, the road ahead's just going to be extremely tough, not knowing what was going to happen.
It was just a little bit crazy. I won't go too much into it because it's still very traumatic for me.
After months of deliberation, the Commonwealth and state governments agreed to give Norco $46 million to help with the $100 million rebuild.
And it wasn't until, you know, they finally come out and said they agreed to fund it that, you know, that a lot of pressure went off, you know, off everyone's shoulders.
The factory will be fully operational by Christmas, employing more than 130 people and churning out more than 500,000 litres of ice cream a week, which will be sold across Australia.
So this is our premium tub line. It does ½ litre and 1 litre products. We've got the product coming out of the machine here. It gets a date code printed on the bottom. It gets its picture taken to make sure the graphics and barcode and lid and etc. is right. It comes through a metal detector to make sure there's no foreign objects. It's check weighed to make sure it's the right amounts in the product. It then goes through here and gets inverted, and then it goes through a spiral chiller that really snaps in the freshness of the product and makes a very, very good inclusion ice cream. We'll get here onto this.
There have been some critical changes made across the factory, including the ice cream vat room.
Is where we age all the ice cream, and during the flood we had a significant amount of water through this room. It was about that high, which meant that all of these tanks lifted up, bent all the piping, popped out the roof. So we've got concrete walls, reinforced concrete walls with support arms that come over to provide additional reinforcement in times of flood. And then we have what we call the submarine door out in the entry to this particular room, which gets bolted up to keep all water out.
Part of the floodproofing includes moving key electrical equipment.
These cabinets are at 15-metre flood height, so they're above a 15-metre flood height. And, you know, we see that as a key part of our resilience measures moving forward, because here is where a lot of time and money gets burnt in a flood. You know, water and electricity don't work well together, so...
So this is the engine room of the factory?
Certainly the electrical engine room of the factory. It controls all of the equipment. It runs power to all of the production lines, all the pumps, all the compressors, the air system. Without this, the site doesn't run.
For Josh Sawtell, a third-generation Norco employee, it's a big relief to be back with the team.
It does give us some sort of hope moving forward that, you know, Lismore is going to eventually bounce back. The employment I think it's going to bring to the area, I guess you could say, getting life back to normal.
Back on the farm, the flood has triggered some practical changes for Paul Weir.
You got to work with Mother Nature, you know, and unfortunately that was, hopefully, you know, we'll never see another one like that again in our lifetime. It will happen, it can happen, and so you got to be ready for it.
He's feeling bullish too about the dairy industry's future.
We're looking to keep going forward. And so, yeah, I've never been so buoyant and confident in my 30 years on the farm here of actually how confident the future in dairy is.
Next Sunday is International Day of People with a Disability. At 19, Katherine Reed became a paraplegic after coming off a horse while working on a farm. Now, Katherine and her husband run cattle and miniature goats in Tasmania. This is her story.
My name's Katherine Reed. I'm from northern Tasmania. I live 22 k's from Launceston with my husband Tim and our 2 boys, Will and Harry. Yeah, that's it. We farm miniature goats and Angus cattle. How is everyone this morning? I've always liked goats. We had goats when I was younger. Bend your foot, thank you. So over winter, everything gets really soft and we have a lot of water in the paddocks and stuff, so their feet tend to get very wet very quickly. So I'm just trying to do a little bit and often at the moment to get them back into the right sort of shape. Will's my main helper with my goat handling stuff. He comes out to the babies several times a day. He comes and checks them first thing in the morning for me and makes sure everyone's warm and healthy. Then usually asks me just after I put him to bed if he can go and tuck the babies in. At the age of 19, I came off a horse, leaving me a paraplegic. I remember everything from when I had my accident. It was in some ways an ordinary day. And so I went off on this horse. He was one I'd had trouble with before. And I was saving my favourite horses for later in the day. I went, I'll get this rotten thing out of the way and then I'll come back and I'll do the fun ones. And this rotten one, I got to the end of the track and went to pull him up from a fast gallop and I couldn't stop. From almost flat out, I hit the ground. I had no horse underneath me. I literally got left behind.
The bottom just fell out of my world. I remember someone said to me, "Mrs. Reed, are you okay? Are you okay? You can't let us see you cry." And I thought, I'll cry if I want to cry. And I wiped away my tears and I walked in and I didn't cry. And there you were, just lying there, quite serene. In fact, probably more serene than I'd ever seen you. You were covered in wires and paraphernalia and you said to me, very, very calmly, you said, "Hi, Mum. You should see my my helmet."
So this is the helmet from my accident. I remember it looking a bit more dramatic than that.
Yeah, I thought it had spiderweb bits all down the side.
So still, it was a fair whack. What was it like for you at a time when all the focus was on me?
Well, in the hospital, it was fine because that's what was expected. Everyone was focusing on you. It was more the months after that the first question's, how's your sister? And you get that for the first couple of months and then when 3 years later, that's the first question still and people forget to ask how you are and what's happening with you and get a little bit sick of it then, but eventually you want it to stop and it'd be nice for people to ask about you every now and then.
Prior to my accident, I had been working on a thoroughbred property that was both a thoroughbred stud and a racing stable. I'd kind of got quite interested in the breeding side of things. People don't know what to do with people in wheelchairs, especially when there's horses involved, and everyone's sort of a bit scared to let me do anything or try anything. And so that was where the idea of running my own stud came from. Timmy, can I grab you for a sec, please?
Yep, that's all right.
Can you pop her collar back on?
If you can grab her.
So while I kept trying to get work in the racing industry or breeding industry in Tassie, there just wasn't that kind of opportunity for me. Yeah. I've always found genetics really interesting, even in high school before I was working with animals. So to do the genetics side of what is a goat stud kind of ticked that box for me and allowed me to follow that interest.
We'll just gentle.
I have to be very patient and strategic at this stage with catching them, so they're slowly getting better. I try and make sure that I get hold of them each day. Yeah, get hands on each one of them every day so they can have a bit of a cuddle and a bit of a scratch so they get used to it. She's over here, Frida. So we've had a lot of trouble in the last year or so in this paddock with barley grass and with storksbill. So the goats will eat a bit of it when it's quite young like this, but they like to have a bit of everything. So it's got to the stage where this paddock was just a massive problem. So what we've done is Tim's actually put a mixed fodder crop down behind us here.
So when we came in almost 10 years ago when we bought it, was pretty much set stocked property with about 6 permanent watering points. So often it was 3 or 4 paddocks opened at once. So we've changed over to the regen practices very much. We haven't used any synthetic fertiliser here for almost 5 years now, 6 years. And we're doing diverse fodder crops, cover crops.
Tim's actually come along and mown or whippersnipped strips into this paddock for me so that I can kind of get around a little bit better. If I'm looking at something like this, I'm going on the quad bike. So, yeah, I'm not trying to negotiate that sort of thing in my chair. Basically, anything outside of the yard and the goat paddocks and the driveway, I'm hopping on the quad bike to get around the farm.
Like last year, we had trouble November. Having a wife in a wheelchair or anyone with a disability, there's different things you have to set up around the farm so that they've got accessibility and can be included in what they do. Like our biggest thing on this property to start with was making gates swing. There was, I think, 3 gates on the entire property that swung.
And then my gate here, Tim's actually got me an airlock because they're smart enough that they'll often try and follow me out. So I've got my 2 gates here that I shut that one behind me before I open my other one up. So. Come on.
You can't hurry?
If I'm pushing my chair across flat ground, there's very little resistance. It's quite easy. But as soon as there is carpet or grass or gravel or any kind of uneven surface involved, it's both physically and mentally really draining because I have to be constantly concentrating on where my wheels are going. Some of that dog. It's full of weeds.
Everyone can see that much.
The thing about being in a chair is just how much energy it takes. I'm using 1/3 of my body to do what most people have a whole body to do these jobs. Plus, I have to lift full dead weight. When I do something like get onto the motorbike, I have to then drag the dead weight of 2/3 of my body up. It's amazing how heavy your legs are when you have absolutely no control over them. So, I don't have a roll bar on here because that would have made that exceptionally difficult. But we are going to grab my helmet now. One of the things I've found quite difficult about being back on property is that there's all this conflicting emotional baggage that kind of comes with it. There's the fact that I can't do all these things I used to be able to do and the grief that comes with that. There's the fact that intellectually I know how to move a fence, I know how to move livestock, I know how to check on animals, and I know how to go and dig up thistles and all these jobs.
Division of labour on the farm, pretty much I'd say 90, I'm trying to be polite, 99% would be me. Looking after the goats and things, Katherine does most of that. I have to help out, obviously, with things like holding goats or moving their shelters, bits and pieces like that, but most of the other stuff Katherine will do. Being on the farm's great with the peace and quiet and you think you're really active, but compared to how fit and active I used to be, strength-wise, you're very fit. Cardio, and sometimes mentally, you're not actually that fit. You're doing a lot by yourself, and you're often sitting for half a day in a tractor, or just getting out, or just walking back and forth up a fence. You're not actually doing a lot of heavy physical work. And then the fact of having a disabled partner, wife, I used to lift Katherine in and out of the tractor and my ute because it's too high for her to get into it by herself. And in an OH&S point of view, when you're lifting something even by yourself that's over 60 kilos, it's completely against all the rules. And so, yeah, I have to look after myself in that sense.
Right, shut it behind me.
I've had a shoulder redone from tearing, having a slap tear in that, which at one point I'm driving home from jobs with only one hand to change gears and steer with because I couldn't lift my right arm. And then the funniest part of that was when I came out of hospital after it, I'm in the passenger seat and Katherine's driving and she's like, I'm not used to being the able-bodied person in this relationship.
La 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 la. This is the third car I've had since I had my accident. I used to have push-pull hand controls. These ones are actually a bit different in that I've got an electric accelerator, which makes it sort of driven by my finger rather than my whole hand. And took a little bit of getting used to, but it's quite nice. Down low. I get many comments from people, very well-meaning and well-intentioned, about how good a job I'm doing when they see me out and about. So I might be at the supermarket getting my groceries and someone will come up and tell me that I'm doing a great job or whatever. For me, I've been in a chair 15 years. That's a very basic job for me to do, and I think it comes down to this sense of internalised ableism, I suppose, is probably the term you'd use, that we just don't realise the way that we approach disability, and to have a disability is often considered this horrible thing. And I mean, it's not something you'd choose, but it's also not always necessarily as big a disaster as we think it is. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kath Sullivan. The European Commission has extended its approval of the controversial weed killer glyphosate by a decade. Authorisation in the EU was set to expire on December 15 after a one-year extension was granted last year. Farmers globally were worried the Commission wouldn't renew its approval, given pressure from anti-glyphosate campaigners and claims that glyphosate is a health hazard. But the Commission defied those expectations in a split decision this week after key member states, France, Germany and Italy, abstained from voting. Earlier this year, an Australian class action was launched against the makers of glyphosate by people diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma who were exposed to Roundup. Closing submissions in that trial are expected early next year. The federal government has just 2 weeks if it is to change the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Federal Water Minister Tanya Plibersek wants to extend the deadline for water-saving projects and establish new projects, as well as allowing for more water buybacks to return water to the environment. Currently, there's more than 700 gigalitres of water that was promised to the environment when the plan was legislated that won't be delivered by the plan's 2024 deadline.
We know that without this legislation passing, we won't be able to deliver on the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. That's a disaster. It's a disaster for our farmers, it's a disaster for industry, it's a disaster for tourism, it's a disaster for the 3 million people who rely on the Murray-Darling Basin for their drinking water.
Farmers, business operators and local councillors have protested in the New South Wales Riverina, claiming buybacks would hurt those who are left behind.
Keep workers working. Down the line, you will lose industry, you will lose confidence, you will lose population, and then that'll have a decline on our communities.
There's less water, there's less farming, there's less produce bought from our businesses. And we can't employ more people.
The government wants the amendments sorted before Parliament rises for the end of the year and the plan's existing deadlines come into effect. To do that, it will require the support of either the Coalition or the Greens.
We need a guarantee that water is going to flow. At the moment, the government's legislation doesn't promise that.
A new weir has opened in central Queensland, the largest built in the country since World War II. Construction of the Rookwood Weir, west of Rockhampton, began in 2020. The project was plagued by cost blowouts and building delays caused by inundation. It includes fishways and a turtle crossing. Once it fills, the weir will hold up to 86,000 megalitres of water, expected to be available from next year.
The weather events of the last 3 years have demonstrated how quickly this river will flow and flood. And we're looking forward to testing this weir in that.
And finally today, residents in Queensland's Gulf country are battling a plague of long-haired rats.
Oh, shit.
Corumba is the latest town to fall victim to the rodents, with thousands of dead rats washing up on the fishing village's beaches, creating a foul stench. The rats are chewing through electrical wiring, causing thousands of dollars of damage. Yuck. For another week, that's Landline News.
A lot of Australians love a cup of tea. In this next story, you'll meet an enterprising father and son from Queensland's Sunshine Coast who now know just how much effort goes into growing it and making it. Here's Courtney Wilson.
Tucked away in a place most people have likely never heard of. Flanked on one side by national parks and on the other by a beautiful man-made rainforest, father and son duo Daryl and Brendan Collins are doing something unique.
Arakai Estate is in Belthorpe, which is a small community in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, and we started the property to plant rainforest trees, essentially, growing rainforest trees for timber.
We went into the tea making thing very naively, thinking, oh, this will be easy. It certainly isn't. We're aiming to produce a very high quality tea, a very high quality whole leaf tea. We're probably the only producers in Australia that do it.
In here. Daryl and his wife Lorraine bought this place in 1999. It did not look like this back then.
I ran a cabinet timber business, and we bought this place primarily to establish cabinet timber plantations. And when we bought it, it was a very dirty, run-down piece of land. So we've worked our way through it and cleared it and put in our timber plantations, mostly local or North Queensland rainforest species. Your silver quandongs, silky oaks, Queensland maple, white beech, all of the timbers that are traditionally used for fine furniture or for boat building, or for joinery work.
But what they've grown here is probably not what comes to mind when you hear the word plantation.
What we're doing is reproducing a rainforest, except that when you look at it, everything's in rows. It won't end up looking like that. By the time we've finished, it'll look like a rainforest.
But life went in a different direction. And when in 2004 Daryl sold his timber business, he didn't really need this place anymore. At that time, a 25-year-old Brendan had just returned from a stint overseas and found himself at a loose end.
We're actually going to sell this place. And he very rightly said, you'll never get it again. So, we decided, well, OK, we'll keep it and we'll see how we go.
When it came to the almost 40,000 trees Daryl had already planted on this place, there wasn't much more to do other than wait. So with space and time on their hands, the pair went searching for something else.
We had 140 acres then, and open paddocks, and basically I had the desire to stay here and do something here. So we were looking for something different and something unique.
I saw a Landline program somewhere that talked about tea, and I thought, well, that's interesting. We'll see what happens there. So did a bit of research, and everything seemed to add up. Everything that I looked at that tea required, we had here.
Their tea journey really began in 2008. The first step was to work out what kind of tea they'd produce.
There's really not a lot of knowledge or information in Australia about growing tea that's readily available, but there was a Australian green tea growers group that we were able to hunt down and find some information from.
Their fact-finding mission took them to China and later Taiwan, where they met with master tea producers and manufacturers to source machinery and other necessary supplies.
Sat down with them and told them what we wanted to do, and they basically shook their head and said, that's not how you do it. And we went ahead anyway. You're supposed to know what you're going to grow before you plant, but we did everything backwards.
The plantation was built in 3 stages. There are 12,000 tea bushes in these 5 kilometres of hedgerows.
Tea is a Camellia sinensis, and within that there's thousands of different varietals from different areas, but ours have all come from Japan and they're originally meant for Japanese green tea. It took about 5 years of growing and pruning to get a really nice branching structure, and yeah, after about 5 years we were able to do our first commercial harvest.
So, Brendan, what are you actually looking for when you're checking to see whether or not it's looking good for harvest?
What we're after is the freshest new growth of tea.
So these top couple of tips?
Yeah, ideally just a bud, a leaf and the second leaf, and that's what's going to make the best quality, freshest, sweetest tea for us.
Harvesting the tea has been a journey in itself. To make the job easier, Brendan and Daryl came up with this contraption, affectionately dubbed the Mighty Bike Harvester.
Product of necessity. So yeah, we needed something to hold the cutter and as well as straddle the tea rows. So yeah, Dad and I built that thing over about a week. It's done the job for a good 10 years now, and you've pushed that thing well over 1,000 kilometres up and down the rows. We're glad to have upgraded a bit since then.
These days, this machine makes Brendan's job a whole lot quicker and easier, which is a good thing too, given the tea gets harvested 5 times a year.
Our tea is based on oolong processing. What we're after is a much more floral and sweet kind of tea than what most people are used to here in Australia.
The key to making tea the oolong way is how long is dedicated to withering. Like most good things, it takes time.
So essentially wither for about 20 hours before we do any processing, and that's just wilting the leaf, losing moisture.
From there, it's into the steamer.
The first stage in green tea is a flash of heat or using steam to stop the oxidisation process. And so what we've got here are big heated drums, and the heat basically steams the leaf with its own moisture, and that stops the oxidisation at that point. And that's what locks it in as a green tea.
Once steamed, the green tea is cooled, and then it goes into this roller for about an hour.
This sort of rolls and crushes and shapes the leaf to a degree. It's pretty important in the flavour development, just getting that leaf really, really supple.
It comes out of that roller all balled up, so then has to go through a deblocker before being put into these big dryers.
The green tea process essentially loses moisture every step of the stage, so it dries pretty quickly. Whereas for black tea, it will go into a roller first and through the deblocker, and then we've got an oxidisation chamber, which is a temperature and humidity controlled chamber that basically the tea goes in green. 2 hours later, it'll come out a nice coppery brown colour, but it's full of moisture after that.
Sometimes the black tea has to go through the dryers 2 to 3 times to get all the moisture out. It's all in the timing, and it's a juggle, but one Daryl Collins is happy to be in charge of.
I'm gradually being moved out of the hard physical work and into the sitting on tractors, and I do all the tea processing. And I enjoy that, it's good fun, a lot of hours, but it's good fun.
Enjoying making it is one thing, but making a cuppa that others enjoy is the main game. And since entering the tea arena, the Collins men have been chalking up wins. Their very first commercial harvest in 2015 took out the major prize at the Golden Leaf Awards, a national competition ranking the best in the business.
We had our tea in Ziploc bags, they were handing it out like that for people to try. We were that new to the game.
Since then, they've continued to earn accolades yearly, and they've enjoyed growing their business and sharing the spoils of their hard work with tea lovers from all over.
We've sent tea overseas, all over the world. Sent tea to Kazakhstan, sent tea to the Channel Islands, and we've had some big customers through Europe and Canada, US, places like that.
This property covers around 160 hectares, but just 1 hectare is planted to tea, and that's actually all they need. They aim to harvest around every 6 weeks, and over the course of a year, they produce about 1 tonne of tea.
You know, we can produce more tea on that hectare than we can really manage here in our processing shed.
They also manage about 400 avocado trees on this property, and Brendan has about an acre of ginger in the ground too. All that, alongside enjoying raising a young family here, is more than enough to fill in the days.
The tea gets harvested, doesn't it?
I was just so fortunate to have the property already in the family and just a massive amount of support from mum and dad. You know, if I had to move up here and you know, make a living off the place from the word go, it wouldn't have been possible.
With the tea keeping them occupied day to day and the timber taking care of itself for now, there is plenty to both keep busy and to plan for.
The harvesting will go on well past my lifetime. I'm really just looking after the trees to a certain degree. There'll be things that my kids might not ever see harvested. It's a bit of a family legacy in that regard. Yeah, something that we can pass down hopefully, and that will keep sort of bringing value.
You only get one go at it. Look at that leaf. The trend in farming these days is to give it to your next generation better than what you had it. And having Brendan here as the next generation it makes it even more important. We're hopefully the first generation of a multi-generation farm.
I love the smell of tea.
You love the smell of tea?
Yeah.
When it's in the shed or when it's been picked?
Both.
Both. Yeah, I love the smell of tea too.
Still to come on Landline, the Outback Postie and her mail run.
Honestly, just a feeling of community. Like, there is just this part of being a semi-important cog in a wheel, I suppose. You know, if it's the middle of the mustering and they need food, they rely on the mail to bring the food, or they break down and there's a part coming in the mail. There's so many small elements, I guess, that make it into a great job.
G'day, I'm Matt Brand. Australia's winter crop harvest is at the halfway mark. It's been a bit of a mixed bag this year in terms of yields, but prices have remained fairly strong. Wheat values picked up in WA this week. China continues to buy barley, and rain around northern New South Wales and southern Queensland would give plenty of growers the incentive to get some sorghum in the ground and even some dryland cotton. Now, one of the challenges for growers this week was getting winter crops off before the rain arrived. Here's Jonathan Dyer from the Wimmera with one eye on the paddock and the other on the bomb radar. He tells me they got 38 millimetres and he got most of those faba beans off just in time. Meanwhile, here's a look at a rare harvest of oats near Tilpa in outback New South Wales. When the Darling River broke its banks last year, Killara Station was inundated for months, but when the waters receded, it gave the McClure family a chance to sow their first crop in years.
Out of this event, we've put nearly 2,000 bales of hay and silage aside, and that's obviously for a dry time. We're used to long periods of dry, but the smart way to manage that is to put product away in a good time for a bad time.
More rain over parts of eastern Australia this week kept cattle prices on the up. In a sign of green grass in the paddocks and some confidence back in the market, the restocker heifer prices jumped more than 50% since the start of November. And as for the benchmark Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, well, it's improved about $1.20 a kilo this month. The Deputy Chair of Cattle Australia, Gary Edwards, he told the Country Hour this week that cattle prices are still undervalued, and he feels there's been a chronic overreaction to the Weather Bureau announcing El Nino, but he's tipping some better times ahead.
No global indicator that supports our beef prices being suppressed at the levels that they are at this point in time. So I would be highly surprised if there's not a positive movement here over the next 2 to 6 months.
Sheep and lamb prices are also on the up, although I'm told quality is a bit of an issue at the moment. There's not many producers willing to fork out high prices for grain to finish off lambs, And at Wagga, agents said the number of plainer quality lambs coming through the yards was unprecedented. The wool market is finishing the year on a positive note, with prices for merino types going up for the second week in a row. AWI reports there's been increased buying from China and extra interest from Italy and India, which helped to lift prices at the finer end, anywhere from 20 to nearly 60 cents a kilo. In New York, it was a very steady week for both cotton and sugar futures. And finally, in a sign that Christmas is not far away, here's a look at some new season cherries getting picked in the Yarra Valley of Victoria. This year's crop is looking much better than last season. The growing conditions have been near perfect and there'll be plenty of cherries for sale this summer. And because Chile is having a poor season in South America, export demand for Aussie cherries is expected to be strong, which hopefully means a few extra dollars for our growers. And that is the Landline check on prices. Keep it rural.
Beck Climby isn't your average postie. In the last 6 years, she's driven more than 300,000 kilometres on her mail run in outback Queensland. That's a lot of time alone in the car. But as Townsville-based rural reporter Lucy Cooper discovered, Beck does a lot more than just deliver mail.
In outback Queensland, Beck Climby's mail run is longer, harder and more intense than that of her city counterparts. But she wouldn't trade her route for anywhere else.
Honestly, just the feeling of community. Like, there is just this part of being a semi-important cog in a wheel, I suppose. You know, if it's the middle of the mustering and they need food, they rely on the mail to bring the food. Or they break down and there's a part coming in the mail or a part from a shop in town. There's so many small elements, I guess, that make it into a great job.
Julia Creek is a small town about 3 hours east of Mount Isa on the Flinders Highway. It's from here that Beck Climby's mail run begins. Twice a week, on Mondays and Thursdays, she heads out on a long journey through the towns of McKinley and Kainoona in northwest Queensland.
It's roughly 600 kilometres a day, so twice a week, so 1,200 k's a week, and there's 34 stops, but most of those are just mailboxes, so I don't see that many people each mail run.
And being an outback postie doesn't mean delivering just parcels and letters.
There's been chooks and guinea fowls, and the other day there was a potty lamb. So the potty lamb got dropped off to me about 24 hours before the mail run, so lived in my chook pen for overnight and then came in the car with me the next day until it got dropped off.
Beck loves her job. She makes every mail run special, even though her route never changes. In her 7 years as the postie, she's introduced a book club, morning teas, Secret Santa, even lotto. And today on the mail run, it's show day.
Julia Creek does not have a traditional agricultural show. There's a lot of people on the mail run that are very arty and crafty and very good at making things. And so I thought, well, we could have our own show. And I try to relate everything we do back to the mailboxes. So mail run show is an agriculture show with a difference, I suppose.
Pick up the kids.
For most homes across Australia, the mailbox is at the end of the driveway. But in the outback, that can mean kilometres from the front door.
Cutest pet nominee. Oh, right, we have to take photos so we can remember.
From cutest pet to best photography. The top scones and smoko delights, Mail Run Show has something for everyone. And if not, they can make up their own category. Beck photographs all entries and at the end of the day, picks the winners.
I love the Mail Run Show. It's a long day because there's a lot of things to stop and look at, and I love that when we get to the mailboxes with kids, they're all waiting and they're excited to show you their pictures and their drawings and their cooking, and just warms my heart with how much everyone gets involved. And this year, we probably had triple the amount of entries than we did last year, and it really grew and people really took it on, so I think that's really good.
This part of Australia has extreme weather. There are frequent droughts, but in 2019, there were devastating floods that killed hundreds of thousands of cattle.
Well, I think we lost about 1,700 cattle out of what we have here, 2,700. Yeah, so it was sort of traumatic looking at all the fence lines covered in, cattle and corners where they were just all dead.
It's not a place or a life suitable for everyone. But it's all Gail Batt knows. She grew up on a nearby property.
And you just get ups and downs all the time in the markets, in the weather, whether you get drought, floods. It's just part of life here, and just flow with it.
Her nearest neighbours to the north are 30 minutes away and south 20 minutes. A postie provides an important connection to the world, but Beck is special.
Beck's been a great mail lady. Yeah, set up all these little clubs and shows like today. Every Christmas she drops off a little Christmas present for the kids. Anything that comes up, she'll make sure we're all involved. And it's just great, yeah.
It quickly becomes clear everyone is willing to go the extra mile for Beck.
Oh, he's so cute! That is cool. Belle, you do it every year.
The cutest pet competition is clearly a competitive field. Bright arts and crafts fill the mailboxes.
It's in a frame and everything.
Eskies stop treats from spoiling in the outback heat.
Coffee streusel slice. A favourite smoker at Redland Park. Yum!
The next stop is Rutchelloe Station, home to the Wilson family.
I'd say resilient is the word that comes to mind when describing those who call Beck's Mail Run home. Floods, droughts, isolation, it can all make for a really tough life out here, but optimism always shines through. And Kimberly Wilson and her family are a perfect reflection of that.
Oh my God, is this going to be like a helicopter or something?
No, it's a plane. World War I plane.
That's cool.
Youngest child, Xander Wilson, got creative with his entry this year. But everyone in the family enjoys this time of year.
She's made the mail run a community so that we all have connection and everything. There's different things that she does, like the mail run show day, just to, I don't know, I think bring a little bit of joy in our lives, and it does. It makes you feel a little bit better. I craft for mental health and things like that because I enjoy it, but being able to show her and show everyone else, it's nice. It's just nice to have some interest, and I've even made pieces for Beck now too.
I'm going to get a little plaque for it to say that it was last year's Best in Show.
She says Beck has brought people living on the mail run together, and it's the love and support of the community which have helped the Wilson family through personal heartbreak.
In 2013, we lost our eldest daughter, Peyton, in a farm accident, and we survived, I suppose. We are surviving, and it was a big challenge at the time. We only had Peyton and Cadence, and we found out about a week after Peyton's funeral that we were 3 months pregnant with Xander. So the shocks just kept on coming for me.
That is the fish.
Oh, that's cool.
It's fiery.
Living in the bush can be interesting and rewarding, full of successes and failures. But remoteness can also be isolating, especially for the young. But out here, a postie has made a big difference.
You're sort of connected and disconnected from everyone around you at the same time. I mean, you spend your life on these massive properties where you see very few people for most of the time, but then you also are more connected because of how close everyone is, because, you know, your mail lady, you're closer to her because you're the only people that she might talk to on those days.
Twice a week you've got an opportunity to converse with someone if you want to, and if you are isolated you can always go out and meet Beck at the mail run or leave her a note or do something, or she'll leave you a note. I think that kind of kindness and things is what helps everyone.
The mail run takes a bit longer on show day, and no one is left out of the day's festivities.
So I'm dropping you some cooking. This one's from Margaret at Broadlands. This one's from Kimberly at Ratchelo. That one's from Xander at Ratchelo. And a show bag, because it's show day.
Oh, thank you. Yes, well, I never do any cooking.
There you go.
So...
And it's magazine day, so you get magazines and cake.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, yes.
Hello! Hey!
This show day is happening during school holidays.
Hello! Hey, Charlie! Hey, Jackson!
And it wouldn't be a proper show without show bags.
What do you reckon, Hank? Would you like a show bag, Hank?
Absolutely.
Oh, look at all your stuff. You guys have been so busy. Oh, there we go.
The arts and crafts alone at Braeside were enough to fill a pavilion at the Ekka.
This one's a big one.
Oh, it's another rainbow. So clever, Molly.
When we're going to my dance class in Julia Creek and we see Beck coming, we get screaming. Yeah, but really loud.
Why?
Because we're just so excited to see her. We don't see her very often.
My apple turnovers.
Smoko Treats was a very competitive field this year.
Oh my God. We've got me, we've got John, there's Frankie, Jackson, Molly, Billy and Hank.
They were pretty excited to show her all the stuff that they had made. They've been waiting all week, to have it all ready for her. They've got that many things made up there that they're picking out which ones they want for the best. Yeah, I think she's pretty good anyway. They like her.
Does that really happen anywhere else?
No, I haven't seen it, no. It's pretty special. She's pretty good.
Are people jealous of this mail run?
Oh, I wouldn't know. Well, I would be if I was on another mail run. If I was on another station, I'd be thinking, you should be doing that.
In true Beck style, she's taken her job to a whole other level by creating a podcast, More Than Mail. It showcases the lives of those who call her mail run home.
It's pretty wild and rough. There's a lot of background noise. Like a traditional podcast would be in a studio, there'd be no background noise, it'd all be pretty polished. Mine is anything but polished, but that's what I love about it, is that it is as much an adventure as the actual mail run itself.
Dropping episodes twice a week, Beck gives listeners an insight into what life is like in northwest Queensland.
All the stories that they tell come together to make a life out here, and it's not chronological, so it is just a group of stories coming together to describe what our life is like out here.
And what a life it is, especially her own, with a 600-odd kilometre round trip twice a week delivering mail.
I really enjoy organising things. Sometimes when I put myself under a bit of pressure, I wonder why I do that, but I do really enjoy the mail run show. Like when you get to Braeside and there's 7 kids there that are so excited to see you and have spent their entire school holidays preparing things for the show, you think this is why I do it. The mail run feels like a community in its own right. It's helping them have a fun life as well.
The next night in Julia Creek, locals are enjoying themselves with a classic town versus country rugby league match. The region is enjoying its best wet season in years. The town is alive and spirits are high.
Come on, Gavin, have a crack. This is a fantastic town. There's no crime, everyone has a good time. Once we all get together, it's a big party. Everyone enjoys themselves.
It is, after all, a community that has been through the best and the worst of times, made even stronger by their local postie.
It's just Beck, I think. She's very special.
What a lovely story to end the show, and Landline for this year. From all the team, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you next year when we'll bring you more great Landline stories. Bye for now, but before I go, here's the weekly weather update from the Bureau.
G'day from the Bureau. For Sunday, the 26th of November. It's been a humid, wet and stormy week across the east and hot and dry in the west. And the week ahead looks to be much the same, with widespread rain, severe thunderstorms and heavy falls across the east. Good news for those wanting it, but not great for those harvesting this week, while hot, dry weather continues across WA. Today it will be hot, dry and sunny in WA, with showers and thunderstorms, some severe, developing across the NT, much of Queensland, New South Wales and eastern Victoria. Showers and thunderstorms, some severe, will become widespread across Queensland, while also developing across South Australia and New South Wales on Monday. Further west, it will be hot with isolated thunderstorms for inland areas, but heat does ease along the west coast. Tuesday, a low will move into southeast Australia with rain and severe thunderstorms with heavy falls for parts of eastern South Australia, much of Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, while showers and storms will also impact the tropical north and WA. Wednesday will be similar as rain and thunderstorms, some severe, continue across Victoria and New South Wales, turning more isolated across Queensland and the NT. Hot with isolated showers and thunderstorms across central Australia. These showers and thunderstorms will become more widespread across central Australia on Thursday, but becoming more isolated in the east. And showers and thunderstorms also continue across the tropical north. Rain and storms will spread into much of Queensland on Friday and spread into the rest of eastern Australia on the weekend with possible heavy falls. Heat will also start to build in WA. And that's it for our weekly wrap and for 2023. Have a great summer, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again next year.